Hello and welcome to the Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friend. If you've been looking for a podcast geared towards your growth, self-awareness, navigating your brain's daily mind drama, and deep inner work to become your highest and best self, you are in the perfect place. Let's get started. Good morning. Happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm Macy, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you're brand new, welcome. I hope that you enjoy the podcast episodes and that you get something out of them. And if you're a returning listener and come every week, well, thank you for doing so. I truly appreciate the support. I appreciate you all sharing with your friends, tagging me on social media, reaching out to introduce yourself. I love it. In the month of February, I spoke to 10 individuals, actually 8. 8 actually showed up for their consult of the 10 that's scheduled. But it was so much fun. A lot of you all also said yes to yourselves for your coaching journey. And I just want to celebrate you for doing so, because I remember when I hired my coach 6 years ago, and I got off the phone and my palms were sweating. It was terrifying. And I had no idea what I was in for. And it changed my entire life. I truly, a friend, one of my best friends and I, we joke about it now, but we both went through coaching with different coaches 6 years ago. And we say all the time, can you imagine who we would be today if we had never had coaching? Like, I truly do not know where I would be without it. And I don't mean that in like a good way. Like, I'm sure I would have survived. Obviously, I'd done that up to, 24 years old. But I don't know that I would have been the most mentally and emotionally healthy person. And there's no telling, what my life would look like. If you are in a prolonged amount of stress, like if you feel stress all the time, what you don't realize is that that stress can actually alter your gene expression and set you up for different illness, disease. Like, it can change your whole life if you feel stressed all the time. And this is actually so important that this is a full teaching module that I'm doing in the Equip Society. Like, I want clients in the Equip Society that are learning how to strengthen their emotional intelligence and understand their emotions and understand how other people work as well. I want them to know the impact that stress can really have on you and how to overcome that, because it's our thoughts and our emotions that contribute to that feeling of constantly being in fight or flight and feeling like something's really wrong and getting super stressed out and feeling like nothing is going right or nothing can be easy. But you have to be very careful if that is the way that you operate every single day, because it is not healthy for your body, not just for your mind, but for your physical body. Our physical body is not geared was not created to be in a stress response 24/7. And a lot of people these days are living under stress 24/7. And it's why mental health is at an all-time, or like mental illness is at an all-time high, why anxiety is at an all-time high, why depression is at an all-time high, because it actually alters the gene expression in your body. The more your body feels that fight or flight response, like, oh my gosh, I've got to panic about something. I've got to be worried about something. This is stressing me out. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I can't deal with this. I can't handle her like this. I can't handle him when he's like this. Those thoughts 24/7, our body was not created to constantly be under stress. Like, we were created to have a fight or flight response when there was actual danger. So like the caveman days, whenever you were hunting and gathering food and you actually had to like go out into the wilderness to survive, like get berries and plants and, maybe attack an animal, right? So that you had food or build a fire. Like, in those days, that's what our brain was designed for, is for those days where if you were confronted by a bear, your body would go into a stress response. It would enter fight or flight, and it would oftentimes either flee, like run away from the bear, or fight the bear, right, in order for you to survive. in today's society, we get stressed out over traffic. We get stressed out over our job. We get stressed out at the grocery store because the grocery stores don't have as much food as they used to have. We get stressed out because of everything going on in the world. We're stressed out because our kids. We're stressed out because of finances, because we don't feel like we have enough time. We're stressed out because we're not going on enough dates with our partner and we feel like there's disconnection. Like, we are constantly staying stressed. And it is so unhealthy for us. And so I just want to celebrate everybody that, one, jumped on a consult call this month, whether you said yes at this time or no for now, whatever your answer was. Celebrate yourself for getting on the call, because everybody says the exact same thing when they get on the phone with me. They'll say, "Hi, how are you? How's your day?" And they're usually like, "I'm okay. I'm really nervous. I'm so scared." And I'm like, you know what? Everybody says that. Every single person that gets on the phone says that they're terrified. And I think that all of them find it wasn't so scary, unless they've also said yes to themselves and they're investing in themselves, then yes, that feels scary too. But it's not that scary. It's not like you're interrogated on the call, right? I ask questions. We get to know each other. I kind of help you learn what's going on in your brain and what's happening with you emotionally. And then I also let you know what I can do for you if you find that it's a good fit and it feels good. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's okay. And that's the extent of a consult call. It's not to twist your arm and be like, you have to work with me right now on the phone. It's like, no, you get to decide. And I fully trust that all of my potential clients are resourceful and aware enough to decide what feels good for them and what they need to do in their life next. And I fully trust their decision, whether it's yes or yes and I'm freaking out, or whether it's no or no for now. It's okay. So I just want to celebrate everybody who did that in February. I also want to celebrate all the people who did say yes to themselves. I had yeses for one-on-one coaching. I had yeses for the Equip Society, which I'm so excited about. It officially opens to everyone on March 4th. And we're just going to be doing some big work in there. So if the stress stuff that I just talked about even resonated with you and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know how to feel better. I don't even know what to do to feel better. I'm freaking out. I'm stressed. Then look into the Equip Society, because if you learn how to navigate your thoughts and emotions, everything else will start to take care of itself. But if you don't currently have the emotional intelligence skill set already built up to be able to handle it, you're going to find that you're a subject of stress a lot over and over and over again, because the only way it can change is if your brain changes, right? If you create new synapses in your brain, new neuronal connections in your brain, you have to literally leave your old brain behind and start to create connections within basically a new brain. I mean, we're not actually trading out your brain, but you're going to create new connections that make you see life from a different perspective and help you handle things differently. And that's really what the Equip Society is all about. So it's a one-time investment. It's $3,000. It is lifetime access. You don't have to re-up anything. You get to take an emotional intelligence assessment upon enrolling. Then you and I will have a 60-minute call to discuss your results of that. And then you get to do all of the modules at your own pace and interact in the Facebook community group and get coaching every single week, because I'm going to be coaching live the group as a whole every single week. And so there's so many resources within there, and there's even more than that, but I'm not going to overwhelm the podcast listeners, but there's so many resources for you to grow. I'm so excited about it. This program has been a labor of love, and truthfully, the work that has ultimately changed my whole life in 6 years. So I'm just really, really proud of everybody that is, learning to say yes to themselves and do something that scares the shit out of them because I get it. And every single client that said yes this week, they've been like, like a heavy breaths, like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. And I just remember me being there 6 years ago, but I also have been there every single time I sign up for coaching, with whether it's been a different coach or a different program or whatever, short, long, it doesn't matter. It's always felt so terrifying because you're leaving your old brain behind to build up new connections. And that means the death of an old brain, essentially. And so
it is scary. It's scary. It's out of your comfort zone. So what we're going to talk about today is actually in relation to this, and it's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. This is also a module that is going to be way more in depth in the Equip Society. But I wanted to get on the podcast and kind of talk about some of the differences between the two. All right, so let's talk about this. So ultimately, a growth mindset is when you're willing to evolve, you're willing to grow and change and ultimately become uncomfortable. When I was in occupational therapy school and we were finishing the last week of class, they had us do an exercise where we picked a quote that we loved that we wanted to carry with us for the rest of our life, and basically, or throughout our career. And we had to go outside and stand in a circle, my entire class, with the professor, and we had to read off what our quote was. And hilariously enough, I don't remember my quote, but I remember a classmate of mine that said that the quote that she wanted to live by in her career and just in general was, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And when she said that, it hit me because I did not like being uncomfortable. Like, I had lived my life avoiding discomfort at all costs. And, I also, when I was in occupational therapy school, that's how I was introduced to emotional intelligence and even the assessment, because that's what they made us do when we first became students, was know what our emotional intelligence was, so that we knew kind of, based on what happened in grad school, where we were going to kind of fall off track or where we were going to beat ourselves up. And for me, my low score came around like grit and being able to get back up and be flexible and manage my stress. Like, that was really, really hard for me. I did not like being stretched. I did not like being uncomfortable. I just wanted everything in my life to feel easy because of a lot of trauma that had made my life feel hard for so long. And I think if you have had a really, what you would consider hard life or a difficult past, you do at times want everything to be easy, but easy is not where things change. And so what is required of you is to have a growth mindset where you're like, you know what, as much as I want my life to feel like this super easy thing, I know that in order to grow, I'm going to have to be uncomfortable. And that is why I think making that investment in coaching can sometimes be so difficult, because on the one hand, you want everything in your life to change, but on the other hand, you're fighting a brain that has fought you to be the same way as you've been your entire life up to that point. And it can feel very, very, very uncomfortable. So I loved when my classmate read off the quote, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I have never forgotten that quote. That was in 2015. I have not forgotten that quote. And I say it to myself all the time, get comfortable being uncomfortable. So every time I'm uncomfortable, I'm like, girl, you better get comfortable with it. Because in order to be your highest self and step into who you want to be, you're going to have to feel discomfort and know that you're going to be okay. You can handle whatever emotion comes up and it's going to be okay. A fixed mindset is staying as you've always been, right? It's a very limiting mindset. It feels like even if you're not happy, you find all the reasons why it feels more comfortable, why your current lifestyle is working for you. It's harder to change. You're not as willing to look at new perspectives and new ideas of thinking. And usually if something goes wrong in a fixed mindset, you beat yourself up. You think that you're worthless. You think that you're no good. You immediately assume that if something goes wrong in your life, that it's your fault or that it makes you less of a person, and that it means that you're not good enough or not smart enough or not pretty enough or whatever. That's a fixed mindset. It's so limiting versus in a growth mindset, it looks more like, even if things go wrong, it means nothing about me. Like, I can persevere, I can continue to learn from this, and it's just a whole different energy that gets carried whenever you're willing to like grow and be the best, highest version of yourself. So it's also feeling more inspired because you know that you have limitless potential and you live in a realm of what we would call in coaching, like a realm of possibility. So in a growth mindset, it's like everything that I could ever want or desire is possible. Like if I just work on my mind and the emotions I need to feel, then I know I can create a life that feels really, really good for me. And a fixed mindset is like, I'm never going to have it. It's never going to be fair. Life's not fair. It's basically like this all or nothing mentality. And I used to have an all or nothing mentality. I would be like, either I work out all the time and I eat healthy all the time, or I'm eating the entire cake and self-sabotaging. Like I had such an all or nothing mindset. Like nothing was, like I was never able to look at something and have balance. It was always like, it was either all positive or all negative. It was all one thing and all another thing. And it's so interesting whenever we live that way, because that's not how life works at all. Like you're going to have highs and lows. You're going to have the 50-50 where life, it feels really, really good. And then other times where life feels really, really bad. And the only difference between the two is what emotions are happening in the process. But with a fixed mindset, we often perseverate on the things that are not feeling good, and we think that they're never going to change, or we complain about them but then do nothing to change it. Like literally we just feel good with complaining and then doing nothing to actually make it better. And that's where a lot of people live in society, right? It's like they complain about not having enough money, they complain about not having enough time, they complain about being stressed out all the time, they complain about their job, they complain and complain and complain. But what are they willing to do to actually fix it? Like a lot of times we think that it's beyond our control to fix it. And that's a part of a fixed mindset. Like it's like, oh, well, that other person needs to change, or I'm never going to be able to be happy, or, well, until my money changes, I'm never going to be content, or until I have more time, I'm never going to be able to do the things I want to do. So, and they just feel like that is truth. Like that's a story that plays in their mind, and they're like, nope, it's true. I'm going with it. I truly don't have time. I truly don't have money. I truly don't have a good relationship, or I truly, whatever it is that they say, and they say it like it's the news and that it's like an absolute fact. And that's where coaching challenges people a lot of times, because those are just stories in your mind. Like everything has the potential to be shifted or changed, or for you to grow and see something differently. But if you're in a fixed mindset, it's going to be a lot harder to do. Now, I've shared on the podcast too, the reason why, like if you're young and you're listening to this, so actually in 2 weeks ago had an email and then a message from two different people, and I think they were both 17. And I just wanted, like I commended them, like, thank you so much for reaching out. It's amazing that you're listening to this podcast at 17 years old and getting something out of it, because, they're like most people don't find this kind of content until they're like an adult and they are like, oh my gosh, I feel like my brain is exploding. So to be introduced to it at 17 when you still have so much time to shift and change your life is a really big deal. Like I wish that I would have even known this stuff at 17. I probably would have suffered a lot less, because at 17 I was still going to therapy sessions and feeling like everything was beyond my control and hating my life most days, and seriously like crying myself to sleep every single day in depression and feeling just super out of control and out of body. And so I just think of these 17-year-olds that reached out to me and they're like, hey, I'm really young, but I'm listening to your podcast. It's changing my life. Like you're making me think about things differently, and it's just giving me so much peace. I think that's amazing. So shout out to you if you recently reached out to me and you are 17 years old. I'm talking about you, and I think that you're incredible. But I also think that everybody who comes here and listens is incredible, because I know that sometimes hearing this kind of stuff can be very triggering. It's also very new, and it makes your brain have to grow and stretch. So you even being here listening to the podcast means that you're in a growth mindset. Yes, you may have some things that are still in a fixed mindset where it's like, I don't want to change it. I don't want to do it. It sounds hard. I'm not going to do it. Nope. You might have moments like that and certain things like that. But if you're coming here listening to the podcast, especially as a regular, and you're binging it, or you're just like, oh my gosh, I need to know more, you're in a growth mindset. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like not everything in your life is going to change overnight, especially if you have unchecked thoughts in your brain that feel like the news. That's exactly what happens with people with a fixed mindset, is that whatever stories are happening in their brain, it feels like the truth because it is the truth for them, but it doesn't mean that that's how it has to be. It's what is true for them right now, but that's not how it absolutely has to be. But the hardest part is trying to show someone with a fixed mindset that whole idea, because if their mindset is fixed, they're going to rebuttal, they're going to resist it, they're not going to believe that it can be different, right? They're going to fight for their ability to be right. And that's what I think makes coaching also so powerful, but also so hard, is that every single person on the planet has a brain that wants to fight to be right. That's why we have, like war, seriously, because we are emotionally triggered by something. We're not managing our thoughts, and then we decide how we're going to interact with other people based on our mood and what's going on. And so if we don't have an emotional intelligence and we're not managing our mind, that's what creates division, right, in our world. It truly is. It's all a matter of what's happening in the mind, what's happening in the body, and how are we responding to all of it. And so with a fixed mindset, it's like, I don't want anything I don't want to grow. I don't want to change. This is the fact, and that's it. And a growth mindset is like, how can this be better? How can we improve? What can I do to feel better in this way? What can I do to become more aware? It's like a growth mindset is much more curious as to what can be done to get the result that you want. And a fixed mindset is basically like, it's this way or no way, or my way or the highway, and that's that. And so it can feel really challenging, right, in life to navigate this, because your brain is always going to fight for you to be right. That's what makes growth so hard. It's like you've had stories for X amount of years, however old you are. So then to challenge those stories can feel very difficult. You'll be more willing to do it if you have a growth mindset, and you'll be less likely to do it if you have a fixed mindset and you have no awareness and don't, or just simply don't want to grow, right? It'll be like, this is the fact. And I think we see this a lot of times with like older people, so like in their 60s and 70s, and this is, a very serious topic, but like even with race, okay? Like race and prejudice and racism in general, it's like if you listen to a lot of older people who have a problem with different races speak, and you go into it with not defensive energy but curious energy, which as a part of emotional intelligence, I really try to do. I try to understand their brain and like what's happening in their brain and why they're feeling what they're feeling, because I have a coach brain. And so if I'm doing that and I'm listening to someone describe what it is that made them that way, it's usually that they've reinforced the same story to themselves over and over and over again, which actually I got off track. And this is what I wanted to point out when I was talking about the 17-year-olds that said that they were listening to this podcast. It's much harder to change your brain, not impossible, but much harder to change your brain after age 35. So to anyone listening to this podcast that is under 35, what I want to let you know is that it is much easier if you start making the decisions to improve your life now rather than wait. Okay, because one, our brain is not fully mature. Our prefrontal cortex, which is our, like decision making and impulse control and all of that, is not fully developed until we're 25. Okay, so that's why it's really hard to like make clear, really good decisions in our life or even know what we want until 25, because our brain's not fully developed. So give yourself a little bit of grace there. So that's why I said with these 17-year-olds that are listening, holy crap, that's amazing. Like you're evolving your brain at hyper speed. Like you're really integrating information that can be with you for the rest of your life because of how early you're integrating it, okay, and applying it. But outside of that, those first 35 years of life, like your brain is much more malleable. So it's more open to new ideas. It's much easier to rewire and change the neuronal kind of synapses, right, that are happening in your brain. So like basically your brain connections that are talking to each other. If something is not serving you, it's much easier to rewire it so that it does serve you if you're under age 35. After you become older than 35, it's not impossible, but your brain will fight to be right much more often. So you're going to have a lot more resistance. So if I'm coaching someone that is 25 versus if I'm coaching someone who's 45, it's not that one is necessarily easier than the other, right? But the 25-year-old is probably not going to have as much resistance as the 45-year-old who has done the same things and believed the same things over and over and over again for a longer period of time. Those connections in your brain are much stronger, and think of them as being like quadruple knotted in a knot versus the 25-year-old maybe has one knot. So we only have to undo the one knot. If you're older than 35, we have to undo like 4 knots or 8 knots or whatever. And it's not a problem because those knots can be undone. It's just a matter of it's going to take a little bit more effort. As you know, that client may have a little bit more pushback for me. I'm going to have to coach them much harder. I'm going to have to show up in maybe a different energy for them because their brain is going to be fighting what they're hearing a lot more often. Now, also with that, though, is sometimes there's much more wisdom. So as it starts to kind of unknot, as I guess you could say, or rewire, sometimes because of their lived wisdom, they do catch on much more quickly. They understand more complex concepts quicker or more quickly. So there's pros and cons, right? But the ultimate thing is like if you're listening to this over age 35, don't be like, oh, great, I'm freaking screwed. Like I'm never going to be able to change. That's a fixed mindset. So if that thought entered your brain when you were listening to me share all of that and you were like, great, I'm screwed. I'm never going to be able to change or grow, and coaching is going to be hard. And even if I make the investment, it's probably not going to work for me because I'm a unicorn and she's never going to be able to coach my brain because I'm stubborn. Like if you had any of that chatter, girl, boy, you better stop it right now. So I just want you to know that mentality, though, is where a fixed mindset would be, okay? It's like, it's never going to work for me. I'm the exception. I am not going to get the same results as everybody else. My brain's much more complicated. My mind is not going to be able to grow. I'm going to be stuck like this forever. I'm always going to be miserable. I'm always going to be suffering. Like that is a fixed mindset. Do you really want that to be your mindset for the rest of your life? Like, because the older you get, the harder it is to change it, the more set you become in your ways. And that's kind of what I was talking about with the older generation. Like when I'm listening to their beliefs from a place of curiosity and not defensiveness, it's really what they're saying to me overall is, listen, I've thought this way for 65 years or 80 years, and I'm not about to change it now. They're just in a fixed mindset. Now, I'm not justifying any of the things that maybe they believe that feel wrong or that I disagree with. But what I'm saying is that if I bypass what's actually being said and I get curious about why they're saying it, and I actually hear in the words, like in between all of the maybe insults or whatever, and I stay very neutral, what I'm hearing is, this is the brain that has walked me through my life so far, and I don't see a problem with it. And it's the way that I've thought my entire life. It's the way that I was taught. And so that is what it is. This is just how I am. I'm just stuck like this. And that feels like fact for them. That feels like their story. And they probably have like 15 knots. Like we would have to undo a lot of knots. And the thing about it is I can't undo anybody's knots unless they're willing to be in a growth mindset. So like I have had people that want coaching but are not willing to change. And so what that usually looks like is they just won't show up. Like it just feels hard and they stop showing up, right? For themselves. And I never make it mean anything about me because I know that I'm always going to be showing up for my clients. I know that. Like if my clients are willing to show up, I am going to fight like hell for them. Like if they're willing to get their brain coached, even if they're crying and sobbing their eyes out for an entire session, I am going to show up in so much power and hold so much sacred space for them to grow and have their transformation. It's never going to be a matter of if I show up. It's always a matter of my clients need to show up for themselves, and I trust them to do that. I know that it's not always going to be easy, But I trust that as soon as they're willing to show up for themselves, I've got their back. And I've got their back for as long as it takes, as long as they're willing to put in the work. But I'm not going to fight for someone who is going to stay in a fixed mindset and not be willing to feel the uncomfortable things. I'm not going to chase after any clients that, think that I should be chasing them in order for them to succeed. I'm not going to chase you. You have to show up for yourself and be willing to do the work. And it can be messy and it can feel ugly and it can, hold a lot of negative emotion if it needs to and when it needs to. And I have space for all of that. I will fight for my clients' transformation day in and day out. I will fight for your brain. I understand the importance of that. We cannot keep living in this stressful mindset. Like, it will impact your body. Okay, this is a PSA. It will impact your body negatively. You actually living in stress all the time and not changing the things that are stressing you out impacts your body physically. Physically. It changes your gene expression. There are tons of studies on it. You set your body up for disease, literally. Like, you can create disease with your thoughts if you're stressed out all the time, because if your body is in fight or flight all the time, it's basically shutting down internally. That's not to scare you. It's literally to make you aware. So if you're not handling your business, you need to figure out a way to do that, whether that is going for massages, right? Or taking a long walk around the block if you can't afford something. Self-care is not just monetary. So if you can't afford coaching, if you can't afford to go get a massage every now and then, if you can't afford to go buy the self-help books and you're like, listen, I don't have any money. Okay, that is also a story that we could coach on, but that's okay. We won't on here. But if you truly are in a place where you're like, financially, I'm strapped, I don't have the money, go for a walk. There's actually a study that if you walk, it's almost like between a walk and a jog. So basically, if you walk at a pace as if you are being chased by someone, right, but they're far away. So if you kind of get the heebie-jeebies and your neck hairs stand up and you're like, I feel like I'm being followed, the way that you would kind of walk/jog to get away. When you do that for 30 minutes a day, do you know your brain releases the same chemicals as anxiety and depression meds? Did you know that? It's a natural form of getting the same feeling in your body. And it's free. You can go outside and you can do that. If it's cold, put on several coats and earmuffs and gloves and go do that for yourself. If it's not cold, if it's nice and warm, what are you doing? Go out and do that. Okay? Your body doesn't need to be in a constant state of stress. Meditate. There's so many resources even on YouTube on meditating, and there's so many videos on different sounds that can calm your body. I use them all the time. I use different apps like listening to birds. I get seasonal depression horribly. Not so much now since we live in Las Vegas, because for the most part, the weather is always sunny. It doesn't rain. I think it's rained maybe 4 or 5 times since we moved here in September. And the weather is pretty decent. Today it's going to be 78 degrees, which is bliss. So, and it's winter. So that's been fine. But when I lived in Kentucky, I immediately, when it would hit October 1, I would go into depression until about March 1. The dark, the cold, the rain, the snow, the getting dark at 5 p.m., all of that is so depressing to me. I seriously feel like I can't function. I can't think. I'm in a hole. I want to hibernate like a bear. I'm not motivated to do anything. If I didn't have clients to show up for, seriously, I probably would crawl under a rock and just stay there until March. It's just really, really hard. But I would get on YouTube and I would search bird sounds, lawnmower sounds, cutting grass, buzzing bees, and ocean, and fire crackling, and just different sounds that bring me joy. And my favorite is actually the sound of a lawnmower and bees buzzing and birds chirping, and almost where you can kind of hear the wind, like swooshing trees. They have that on YouTube. And I have to tell you that in a dark, dreary, awful winter day when I was super depressed because of the weather and the darkness, I would get on YouTube and I'd put on that sound of like someone cutting the grass, and literally my brain would release happy chemicals because it's almost like I could smell the fresh cut grass. I could envision my papaw cutting grass and me being a kid playing outside and riding my bike. I could, hear the birds and the bees, and it just, like, I almost can even now think about like how the wind felt and how it smelled. And here it would be like a dark, awful day, but I'm listening to something for free on YouTube that is keeping me from falling into a deeper hole. So there are a lot of resources out there for you to self-regulate and regulate your body if a financial investment in something is not what you feel you can do right now. But if you do want to do the work of getting more in a growth mindset and evolving and not being subject to the negative emotions you feel, but really knowing how to navigate them, sign up for a consult call. So on MacyRenee.com, on the very first page, when you go there, on the very bottom, on the right corner is a schedule 60-minute consult button. My calendar is always for 7 days out. Okay. So you can find a day that's open, schedule it. We'll get on the phone. It's not scary. I promise. I'm not going to bite. It's not scary. After you've been through it, it's totally fine. You're not going to have your arm twisted, right? It's not for me to just get a sale, right? It's to really figure out where your mind is, where you currently are, where you want to be, and formulate a plan for how you can get there, whether you are a yes or no to something I offer. Like, even if you need something else. Sometimes I've even recommended to consults, like, I think you would be a better fit for therapy. That's really something that's important to me, both as a former occupational therapist and as a coach, that if someone has maybe never had a therapy experience and seems to be in a frame of mind where maybe that is needed, I will recommend that over coaching with me. I'm not here to, collect a check and, not be able to help you. Like, I want to help the people that I feel I can really, really help and know that I can help them get results. And so if I feel like somebody else is better suited, I will refer you out, even on a consult where you thought maybe you were going to work with me, and it's okay. But if you need to do that for yourself, that is always open and available. And if I have something that can help you, I will offer that. And then it's just up to you whether you want to do it or not, whether it feels like a hell yes or not. There's no pressure ever. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will talk to you next week. And if you need anything between here and now, let me know. And if you want to check out the Equip Society because you love this episode and you want to do this work much more in depth, then go on MacyRenee.com, ways to work together. The Equip Society, the button is right there. If you're a hell yes, all you have to do is click. And as soon as you do that, I will get a notification. I will be in touch with you to administer your EQ assessment and let you get a call scheduled so that we can talk about your results. And all of the video modules open up in the Equip Society on March 4th for everyone. So exciting things. Have a wonderful week, you guys. I'll see you again soon. Bye.